maybe we'll start with the topic of mining and petroleum, Prime Minister, because that is obviously a very exciting one for Papua New Guinea, and you must be very buoyed by not only the improvement in the oil price, which is often tied, of course, to LNG, but also the increased production. And even today we read that the relationship between China and the United States is such that perhaps there may be tariffs being placed on US exports to China of LNG, which may be advantageous, certainly in the short term, to Papua New Guinea. There's a continuing debate in PNG, as there should be, about the best way of ensuring that both the government and landowners maximise the returns from Papua New Guinea's resources, which are, of course, not inexhaustible. Once they're gone, they are gone. It's a delicate balance, is it not? You referred in your speech to the lessons learned from the first LNG project. Do you foreshadow any changes to the way the new gas agreement might reflect that experience? And also, moving forward, that there's been some proposed changes, for example, to the Mining Act, also to maybe redress some of the balance. So does PNG have the balance right, or does it need to do more to make it more in favour of the nation and of landowners?
Thank you, Andrew. Just on the issue about the discussions taking place with the new projects that are coming on stream, particularly the expansion of the current LNG and of course, the second Papua LNG. Let me say this, it's probably not right for me to preempt what our negotiation team is going to discussing with the developers. But I want to say that the first LNG was a unique project. It was our foundation project, so we gave a lot of concessions that are not normally given to such a project. And of course, that was developed at the back of the global financial crisis period where we needed to raise a substantial amount of money to develop that project. The success of it is quite good, but the other side of the story is that many of the other stakeholders, state and the landowners, and especially those who in the project areas, you can see the demands that they are placing today. Issues like social mapping, the landowner identification, all these things were largely not done properly before the agreements were signed. These are mistakes that we don't want to make. The last thing we want to do is to change the physical regime of any of these projects where it's going to disadvantage not only the developers but ourselves. This market is very competitive, and we've been speaking a lot to the industry experts. We've traveled the world. We've seen and discussed LNG issues with many of the leading LNG producing countries. We've tried to learn from the experiences they've gone through. We will structure an agreement that is fair to all stakeholders. But the transparency and visibility of flow of benefits to the landowners particularly must be very clear. That's the regime that we want to clearly establish. We can see the difficulties that we are facing today because of some of the shortcomings of the previous agreements, but there is a good learning experience. So I can assure the business community that we will do everything possible to make sure that the physical regime is stable. And I've always stated that the even proposed changes to the Mining Act, I will be encouraging vibrant discussions between the mining community and government. And because government represents the people, there are propositions that are coming there which reflect some of their thinking. But it doesn't mean that that is the position that we will finally conclude. We will have to negotiate an outcome that is beneficial to everyone.
You mentioned in your speech the importance of diversifying Papua New Guinea's economy, and you indicated some of the investments that are being made in other sectors to try and lift them up, if you like, so that PNG is less reliant in future on the mining and petroleum sectors, which inevitably have their boom and bust cycles. Outside of the mining and petroleum sectors, which sectors do you see as the engine room for Papua New Guinea's growth in the future?
We've clearly outlined to the nation that we are focusing on agriculture, tourism, small to medium enterprises, getting our people skilled up, which is making sure that they're educated properly, skills-based training in technical colleges, building capacities at universities. These are programs that are now well established, and it's been starting to be delivered. In terms of agriculture development in our country, it's always been about availability of land. And we want to ensure that the rights of the landowners are protected, but the land is made available for investors to invest, and the investors' interests are also protected by a proper titling and proper leasing arrangements of those land that's been developed. So we've been partnering a few of the large investors who are starting to come into the country. There's huge interest in cattle, there's huge interest in sugar, huge interest in rice. These are areas where government is not trying to come in and participate to dominate the industries, but we are trying to provide security for the investor, that government is involved with the landowners and with the provincial governments. The model that we have been we're developing is starting to work. Very, very much accepted in some very difficult areas. I'll give you an example. With the Israelis, we've got a poultry farm in a place called Koroba in the Yala province, and it's not an easy place to do business, I can guarantee you that. But the Israelis have done it, and it's very successful. And the people who benefit the most are the mothers who go every morning to the gate to get the eggs, or the chickens that they sell to the local markets, and the children who have access to protein, and that's a huge success. These are models that we want to create. And when those businesses are well established in the communities, government will divest itself out of those investments, and will move into another project. So government has been deliberately putting equity funding aside in our budget to making sure that we invest in agriculture and tourism. With the new tourism plan that we've got, we will be doing the same. Like in Kokopo, we want to build up to at least 2,000 beds hotels in Kokopo, and government will partner, or the landowners or the provincial governments or some of the funds who are now investing elsewhere in the Pacific. We are encouraging them to invest in our country. We give them really good incentives to invest in our country. And having direct flights from Brisbane or Sydney to places like Kokopo, Narita to Kokopo, from Shanghai to Kokopo, you will see quite a steady stream of long-term tourists coming into the country. This model has been successful elsewhere, and I don't see any reason why it cannot be successful in PNG. I always tell my colleagues in cabinet, I think PNG, like Kokopo, has got more to offer than Fiji. In Fiji, you go, you get the bed, you get the beach, and you have the bar. But in PNG, you've got quite a variety, including culture and your unique, diverse environment, and the beaches and the caves, and if you want, you can have a volcano too. So, so these are areas that we are investing in, and of course, some of the successes we have had in the construction industry, we are trying to encourage home ownership by Papua New Guineans. Government has already invested close to 400 million kina with the BSP. Encouraging BSP, we put in deposits in BSP at 0 rate, encouraging BSP to lend at 4% for over 40 years, and that's been a great success. And I think many emerging middle-class Papua New Guineans are buying their own homes, and the families are looked after, and there's a new enthusiasm in that industry as well. So these are areas that the government wants to do more.
Thank you. You mentioned APEC, and it is a very exciting year for Papua New Guinea, and there's certainly a buzz around the country as people come and go from overseas and see Papua New Guinea for the first time, many of them. Next year, of course, Chile will host APEC, and the carnival will move on to another town. But to your mind, from what you've seen so far of the activity around APEC, what do you see as the lasting dividend, the lasting benefits to Papua New Guinea of hosting this extraordinary event?
Well, most important thing is not necessarily about the leaders coming into the meeting. They certainly come to endorse the discussions that has taken place by officials and business community at the leaders' final meeting to endorse that. It is the policies that have been developed in these meetings which liberalize trade between our countries. Despite the rhetorics that's going on about protecting one's economy and things, the global trade will continue to develop and adjust. That is why it is important for Papua New Guinea to participate in these kind of meetings where, for instance, the focus for us is trying to engage with the CEOs Summit, where you will see all the representatives from the leading banks and financial institutions will be there. All the big investment funds will be there. And this is a great opportunity to showcase Papua New Guinea as a destination for investment. As you correctly said, many of them will be coming to Papua New Guinea for the first time. They've never heard of the country, some of them. As I've always said, they think that we're in Africa somewhere. But we are a large economy, emerging economy in the Pacific. If you look at our GDP over the last 6-7 years, we've almost doubled our GDP in that time. And I have absolutely no doubt that over the next 10 years, we will double it again. And I don't think many countries around the world will achieve that. The challenge for Papua New Guinea is trying to make sure that our people migrate from where they are to middle class and beyond that, so that they have got the right skills, right opportunities, so they have a better standard of living. That's a challenge for us. And we can only do that by investing in education. And that is one of our top priorities of government over the last 7 years.
On a personal level, perhaps unusually for a politician, you come from a business background before you entered politics. And I'm wondering what lessons you learned from your time in business and your experience in business, and how has that informed your government's policies since you came into politics and into power, and what do you feel still needs to be done to foster business development? You mentioned, for example, the SME work that you've been doing in government.
Well, coming from a business background and going into government is a huge shock. Yeah, I can guarantee you that. The way they do business in government is not the one that none of us in this room will aspire to. But we've tried to change that mentality. Well, I've been in Parliament. This will be my 20th term year in Parliament. But it has given me opportunity now over the last 7 years to try and get our bureaucracy to rethink the way they do business. And reducing red tape and making sure that things are attended in a timely manner. But more importantly, it's about the experience of business living within your means. And governments tend to live beyond their means. And that has always been the issue about managing government resources. So I think, as I said, if we, at the back of a very depressed and challenging times, we've been able to double the size of our economy, and we are continuing to maintain growth. I think the future of Papua New Guinea is very bright. We have to maintain stability in policy, stability in politics, make sure there's no social issues that will get out of hand, and that's a challenge for any government, whoever it is going to manage the country.
Sir, thank you so much for answering my questions and for your speech earlier today. Will you please thank the Prime Minister?